In this video, I'll share with you 5 things that you want to avoid if you want to increase your technique on the saxophone. Number 1, wrong amount of curvature. Something that I constantly preach to myself, to my students, and on this channel is that the saxophone should be played as naturally as possible. You may have heard people say that the instrument should be an extension of your body. This is essentially the same concept. These modern saxophones these days have been built and engineered by people who have spent tons of time exploring how the instrument can fit the hands better. Even these entry-level horns have amazing key placement that's intended to fit your hands. So when it comes down to the fingers, one of the most common mistakes that I see that could be slowing down technique is playing with too much or too little curvature in the fingers. The curvature should be as natural as possible. So try this. Try holding your hands to your side as if you were about to walk or you're just standing there. Now look at your hands. Your fingers have a nice natural curvature. Now take your hand and just slide it onto the saxophone. This should be your home base, a nice relaxed curve. Not this and not this. Now my one disclaimer is that there are a small amount of adjustments that you might have to make if you have small hands or very large hands. But even in that, for the smaller hands, you don't want to have your fingers curving more than they need to. And for your larger hands, you don't want your fingers to be flatter than they need to be. Just find that sweet spot that works for you. Number 2, too much thumb. This one is closely tied to the first point of having the wrong amount of curvature. But having too much thumb on the back of the saxophone can be slowing down your technique as well. Your thumb is one of the underlooked components of bad technique in my opinion. So check it out. If I slide too much of my thumb onto my thumb rest, it causes me to severely curve my fingers to touch the pearls of the saxophone. Similarly, if I play with too little thumb on the thumb rest, it causes me to flatten out my fingers on the front of the horn. You want to make sure that you have just the right amount of thumb on the back of the horn so that your fingers fall into a relaxed curvature. One tip is that you can adjust the position to make it more comfortable for your hands by loosening the screw and slightly rotating and adjusting it. Now with the left hand thumb, it's very similar. You don't want too much thumb on your thumb rest. Another thought is that you don't need to have too much of your thumb covering that octave key. So you only need just enough thumb so that your fingers are curved and allows you also to rock on and off of that octave key. Which brings us to number 3, the wrong octave key movement. Another common thing I see is for the thumb to completely lift off of the octave key when it's not being used, or lift off of the thumb rest when it's time to press the octave key. Try to avoid this motion. Instead, train your hands to press or rock onto that octave key. So maybe concentrate on the bottom pad of your thumb to always stay connected with your thumb rest, even when you're pressing the octave key. I feel like this is the most efficient way and the most efficient movement of your left hand thumb, and it could lead to smoother and quicker technique. Now number 4, collapsed finger joints. Something else that you want to look out for that may not be allowing your technique to reach the level that it could is collapsing your finger joints. As we mentioned before, you want your fingers to have a nice relaxed curve. And if you press down with your fingers too hard, a common thing is you might see your fingers collapsing like this. And a lot of times this could be a sign that there's tension in your hands, which is not the best for improving your technical skill or speed. So watch out for this, and this can be fixed by practicing slowly in front of a mirror and concentrating on those specific fingers that might be collapsing. Something else you can do without the horn that can help is putting your palms flat on the surface, making sure not to collapse your fingers. Press your fingertips firmly one by one onto the surface. This is something that's really helped me to train my fingers to stay in a nice curved position. The great thing about this, the best thing about this, is that you can really do this almost anywhere. And lastly, number 5, lifting your fingers too high. This one might be a little obvious, but work to keep your fingers close to the keys. Every finger has a contact point, and the thing to remember is that the higher you lift your fingers up, it first has to come all the way back down before you can even press the key down, and this can really affect your technique. This is a big habit I had to break when I was in high school and in college, and I worked really hard over the years not to lift my fingers up so high. And once I sort of controlled that a little bit, it's really done wonders for my technique. So practice slowly in front of a mirror so that you can see what your fingers are doing. And another crazy thing that I did was practicing my scales slowly with coins under the pad of my fingers. I wasn't very good at it, but it really did force me to get a sense of what it felt like to keep my fingers close to the pearl. So try to keep your fingers as close as you can to the instrument. So those are the 5 things that I would suggest that you avoid if you want to improve your technique. None of these things will fix themselves overnight or without careful and diligent work. But a big warning here is if you get serious about this, you might even feel like your technique is getting worse for a little bit until you get used to some of these things. But once you hone these skills, I promise you that you'll experience the growth on the horn that you're looking for. So that's it for this video. So I'll see you next time, and until then, happy practicing.